It's interesting you've had it cut into a fashionable bob, though. It slightly reminds me of my She-Ra figure. I obviously had a She-Ra figure when I was a kid, but I cut her hair into a fashionable bob because I figured it was better for fighting because the long hair would get in the way.
Yeah.
Practical thoughts, you see, practical thoughts. Hello everyone, welcome to Talking About Doctor Who, and this week we are looking at part 1 of season 17. Let's keep that the right way around. I'm Paul, or look at that, he just, did you see the flash of something alien that wasn't Jason? I'm Paul, or P-Bal. I'm joined today by...
Hello, it's James.
Hello, it's Jason. Oh my word.
I hope you've got a fully functioning power pack.
I have. See how long the recording goes on for.
How long has that taken you to do, James?
Let's not talk about that. But
it's 10 minutes you'll never get back, isn't it?
Exactly.
As long as that.
And the kitchen floor will never be clean again.
No.
Okay, so the first story of the season is Destiny of the Daleks. So which one of you, and again, which one is prearranged to start this one?
I'm quite happy to make a start this time out. I think James and I have tossed the coin, and it looks like I get the first go at this today. Okay, so season 17 opens with a newly regenerated Romana and the return to Skaro, where both the Daleks and the Movellans are hunting in the Khaled ruins for Davros. Someone's a bit popular, aren't they? What can I say? It's the start of a new season and heralded with the Daleks, which is always I always think a good way to start things off. Season 17 for me is an odd season, and you'll discover how I feel about it as we go through the conversation over the next couple of hours. But starting it with the Daleks is always a bit of a surefire way to get going. Genesis of the Daleks obviously was the story that preceded this. And for me, obviously, that's an epic story. We've talked about that in our season 12 review. This Dalek story, however, for me, falls just a little bit flat and doesn't really follow on the kind of heights that I felt Genesis had. You've sort of got the Daleks on the hunt for Davros, and the Movellans are thrown in for good measure. But these Daleks are, I don't know, the whole thing just feels a little bit tired and a bit sort of we've been here before, we've done it before type Dalek story. So could have chosen potentially a stronger opener for me in this one.
When you say we've done this before, I think the only time we've had a Dalek against a monster that's meant to be their equals is the Mechanoids, and that was 1 week in 1965. So I don't know, is this not a good new spin on the bring back the Daleks? Here's something that's meant to be as good as the Daleks, and a monster that's meant to be as powerful.
I think the Movellans are a great idea in principle. I kind of think that they were thought through, but I just don't get this particular story. So there could be a number of reasons behind it. But yeah, the Movellans and the Daleks are obviously chasing the same thing. They're clearly at some kind of a war with each other. But it doesn't add anything particularly to the tension of the story. The Daleks are still, I don't know, they just feel a bit tired in this story, a bit sort of just there for the sake of being a Dalek story for me, in a way.
But the whole ethos of the story, though, is that the Daleks are at war with the Movellans, so they've gone purposely to find their creator so that they can get out the Umpus and beat them. So, and then the Movellans have gone after them to find out what they're after for what they're up to. I don't think you could do Destiny of the Daleks without the Daleks.
I like the idea of the Movellans and the idea that they've come to an impasse in the war because they're both really logical. And we've seen that sort of thread before in different Dalek stories, like Evil of the Daleks, where they're talking about the human factor and the Daleks need to evolve. And, that's a theme that comes up in other Dalek stories as well, about it's great that they're logical and they're ruthless killers, but what if they come up against someone who's equally logical, like the Movellans? It becomes a stalemate. And this story, I don't know, there is something about this story, and there's a couple of things about it which doesn't make it a great Dalek story for me, and we'll come on to those points. But I think it's something we've seen in other stories where someone goes off looking for Davros to find him. To we see that later on in other Davros' stories. And I think going back to some of the points we made around Genesis, and I think it was you, P-Bal, were talking about Davros. This is where it starts to become the Davros story rather than the Dalek story. Davros is the center of it. The Daleks are just part of it. And there are some moments. I really like the cliffhanger of the first episode where the Dalek sort of comes through the glass wall. And it's quite an exciting moment, but it's kind of ruined by the Dalek sort of, repeating the same mantra about do not move 7 times before you get to the actual cutaway to the music. I'd rather, they don't seem as scary. And certainly the way that Tom Baker treats them when he's up the shaft and he's like, you can't get up, you can't climb up behind me sort of thing. They're kind of downplayed. So it's a different dimension to the Daleks for me, and it doesn't quite work. It's not one of the Dalek stories that I rate particularly.
The Tom Baker thing, I think, is quite often derided though, but it's what kids were saying. It's what the papers were even after they did it in remembrance. It's what the papers were printing until 2006. You can't, Daleks can't climb stairs. So I don't think that moment takes away from it. I mean, there's a lot of like darker bits, and there are bits where Tom actually has to act frightened. Lalla is acting her socks off right against the Daleks. She's convincing the audience that I don't think they're played bad. I think the problem is the aesthetic of them, is that the props that are there have been around a few exhibitions and in the back of a couple of cupboards, and they're looking a little bit sad and a little bit battered. But by the same token, does that work? Because they've been at war with the Movellans for so long that actually they're a bit battered. They've been at war, and I think my slight problem with the plot on that aspect is that Mr. Nation has suddenly decided to write them as robots, and actually that's never were completely robots. So yes, they were logical, but they weren't a robot that was a logical thing that could only do a logical thing. They schemed a bit. I mean, I think Death of the Daleks, there's lots of little bits where they're actually scheming, and there's quite a few sort of stories where they've got personality, haven't they? But I think that is part of the onset of the Davros thing, is it's seen as Davros is the human character and the Daleks are a bit more drony almost. I mean, Davros doesn't come in straight away. You still get a nice bit of... I mean, you have that kind of build towards the episode, and you know that they're on Skaro, and that's nice. As is ever the way with any of these situations, if your Doctor Who story is Destiny of the Daleks by Terry Nation Part 1, and the cliffhanger is the reveal that the Daleks are there, it's slightly powerless, but it's nice, and I think that they do make an impact on that cliffhanger. It is true that there is a slight fault on the edit there. I think Ken needed to come out just a couple of lines shorter. It does feel like the next scene has started, because you've still got keep reacting like that. It's like, but no, there's niceness. I mean, it's nice to have the two monsters. I sort of would argue that the Movellans aren't necessarily the strongest. But I mean, when it comes to, you just got to pull out the battery, and they're done. I mean, you'd have thought the Daleks, with all their skill, and might have thought we should work something out where you can just pull out.
They don't have hands to do that, so it's almost the perfect one to go against them, because they can't actually pull the battery packs. They might
have had a couple of the character options. Mechanis sets left with the claw arms. They could have got in there, got those packs done. I mean, you actually probably can't get a more 1979 looking monster than the Movellans. They are full disco. I mean, Juna's been down the market for the spandex and the disco wigs, and I think that's amazing because it is such a 1979 look. We got them briefly back, didn't we? Just for like 30 seconds with Bill Potts, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
Trailer.
We did, that's right. And everyone thought this was the heralding of the return of the Movellans.
Well, Big Finish have done it a dozen times, I think, haven't they? Why can't we get them on screen? Bring back the Disco Movellans. What's wrong with that?
I agree with you about the cliffhanger to episode 1. I think it is one that lives in the memory a little bit. And I do remember it from watching it the first time round. That whole sort of fall down the pit, you're a bit helpless getting away. But I agree with the Movellans, they are so easy to beat. Nick the battery pack and off you go. I thought they were quite convincing though.
They have a very theatrical way of dying, don't they? I do like the hands up. I like that. But that's it. I mean, one of the great moments in this is when Lalla goes and kicks the shit out of Commander Sharrell and pulls off his arm. That is it. That's what you. I mean, talk about Leela being sort of emancipated, but she doesn't hold back, does she? She goes from it at the end there. And she's thinking the poor costume designer thinking, oh, that beautiful pink. I've got to get the sand out of that. I've got to get that clean for the studio now. But I mean, the Movellans themselves. There's a mixture of performance level.
Yeah,
that's how I'm going to phrase it. But you know, it's always nice to see Suzanne Daniel turning up in things. There are mixed set of performances at the moment. But the stars of this show, without a doubt, are the extras.
Oh yes, without
question. There are some amazing. I think you have some great deaths. Some of them are prepared to give it some. Some of them are prepared. Some of them think no. I'm equity minimum. I ain't doing dying here. I'm not paid for this. Some of them are like, this is my moment. This is my moment. Hollywood's calling. If I do a big death, I'm going for it. And then there's also little bits where Tom's like, you're free. And some are like, yeah. Don't talk. Like, oh God.
The burial scene particularly makes me laugh. Where they've carried the person out and they're sort of putting them underneath the rocks there. It's hardly it just makes me laugh because it's like, yeah, that would have been great for the actor underneath all those rocks, but dead easy to pick them back out again at the end.
But I think there's also, I mean, because I suppose the one big cast thing we should probably talk about is what do we think of Davros?
David Goodison. Is it because it's the only time he played Davros, didn't he? And he was wearing Michael Wisher's mask. It looked quite odd. And again, I don't think it's as good as other Davros performances. It's not bad. Don't get me wrong. Nothing particularly that I dislike about it. I think he captures that sort of manipulative, scheming aspect. You know, there's some great scenes between him and the Doctor where they're talking about, you know, the schemes and what the Daleks need to do to win, and you've got that obsession that Davros has in other character performances. The bit where he sends the Daleks off to blow up the Movellan ship. You're right; they've become robots and slaves rather than in other episodes we've seen them be more manipulative and scheming. They just go along with it. But I think he puts in a reasonable performance.
I think for me, the voice, Michael Wisher's voice was part of the characterization of Davros. And I when they're having that sort of sparring match in Genesis, the Doctor and Davros, there's sort of an energy there. I think David does a good job, but for me, the voice, changing the voice a little bit, and I think obviously obviously I can look at it now, but I probably wouldn't have seen it back in the day. But the costume is a little ill-fitting, and the chair at times just seem a little bit like it's not the easiest to glide around and move around. But I think David's giving it a good shot. He's dropped in. Into the role. Obviously been played by somebody else previously. It's always difficult to follow on from somebody else. Yeah, I think it's a perfectly adequate portrayal of Davros.
I think it's easy to forget as well that Michael Wisher had done Dalek voices as well before he was Davros. So I think he was slightly immersed in the culture.
Yeah.
I think David is a good turn, actually. I think he's probably slightly gets a harsh sort of critic of it, I think, sometimes in the, should we call it the Who press? Although people have loved actually the trailer because he's back to do the voice of the trailer, isn't he? So there's been a bit more sort of positivity, I think, about him. But I think he does a good job in it. I suppose it's slightly difficult because Michael is part of a very iconic story, and it's a very, very sort of, it's a very strong performance. And then Terry obviously did 3 goes at it afterwards, so he's slightly more, ensconced in the role, really. But there are some lovely bits. The Tom and Davros, there's some lovely bits. I love I've slept, but now I woke, and you're misquoting Napoleon. I'll tell you what happened to him. This is where I start. I love all this shit. This is the Douglas Adams. Terry would not have put that in there. That's just not Terry. But I love that these little bits are sort of coming. I like that, and I mean, as the season progresses, I think we might have more hints of that sort of element. But I like that. I think I'm there with the average intelligent teenager and university student that's aimed at.
I love the fact Tom's bustling around with Davros, and he's sort of pushing him around all the various corridors bits when they're all sort of trying to get away from the sort of Daleks. I find that quite amusing at times.
Boom, boom, Davros. Can you not elaborate? Great.
What do you think of the... Oh, sorry. Go on.
No.
I was going to say, what do you think, going back to the sort of first scene where you've got the regeneration of Romana and all the different outfits and bodies, what are your thoughts on that sort of first sequence?
Go on, Jason. He looks like he's thinking. He's trying to remember what that is because he's not seeing it. He's trying to think, what is this? Is there a regeneration in this? Who?
Nothing ever changes on these, does it? I think, first of all, I obviously the fact that Romana is regenerated, first of all, so it wasn't something I was expecting when I watched it back in the day. I think Lala's a great choice for bringing in as a companion, although it would have probably slightly confused the younger me, obviously just having had her obviously appear at the back end of the previous season. I can see where the humor's coming in here, and this is very much the trait of this season, particularly with the way that Douglas is writing and script editing towards the stories. But the whole sort of, I'm going to go and choose a body, it's kind of great. It's a great gag. It works well, back and forth. I'm going to choose a body that's too tall or a body that's short or whatever that might be. Obviously, I'm not entirely, again, a lover of that particular scene, but it's a great way of introducing a new companion in when you've already got the companion in situ, and you've changed, the actress has changed, and you're trying to sort of introduce a new character to the audience within a TARDIS scene. So I think it works quite well from that respect.
Look, I mean, even that, not today, thank you.
Yeah, I love it. It was the huge tall Romana, and he just looks up. And there's some brilliant
too tall, take it away. I mean, let's do an anecdote. The two Romanas, the short one and the busty, no, the short one and the tall one, not the busty one. The short one and the tall one are miscredited on the paperwork. They're the wrong way around. Back fans. And I had a telephone call with the short one, the short blue one. I did. I've spoken to all the stars. Let me tell you, all the stars. Little Blue Romana is still upset 40 years on that Tom Baker shadowed her shot in the show and you didn't see her face. I mean, I get it. I mean, I suppose that was your perfect moment, like Martin McCutcheon, but it's still there for her. Never mind. At least you got to speak to me on the telephone, so I'm sure that more than compensated for that situation. It is silly. It is. But then, is it any more silly than the end of the War Games, where he's like, not that one, that was too fat, that was too thin, that was too old. It's the same thing, but they've gone to the trouble of actually getting the actors there and not cheap sketches.
Yeah.
I don't mind it. I mean, imagine the fun you could have with the season. I mean, we've got 100 pre-Hartnell Doctors now anyway, but imagine the fun you could have with a season where you just went, okay, I'm regenerating. I'll have my first story looking like this, and halfway through the story, I'll change into this. You could have mileage. I mean, Showmasters, and he never have another event if you had 12 Doctors in one story.
They should do that. They should do that when Jodie regenerates, and they should just have a series of different faces come up, and one of them should be Chris Marshall, just for the laughs of just going, I knew it, and then regenerate into someone else. Just
regenerate into the little blue one. Give her a moment. She could be the next Doctor. Campaign starts here and now. I think on the subject of the sort of, because we get that's Zilda's little get up, isn't it? I think from Robots of Death that she brings back out. But June does a beautiful job, and I like her notion that the Doctor would have a big enough ego that he'd like his companion wearing a sort of version of. And I think the pink and the very iconic looks, and obviously all the pictures of Lalla and Tom's sort of get up. It's a great look. It's a great fun opener. It's cheap because basically, and I'm at pains to say, the problems with it getting cheap is a budgetary thing. You've got hyperinflation in the real world, and the budget isn't going up accordingly. So actually, Doctor Who is still being produced at the same budget it was when Genesis was on, but the money doesn't go as far as it would have done.
And you can see that coming across slightly in some of the effects scenes, particularly when they've got sort of model shots. And, like I said, the Dalek props were looking a little bit past their best. And okay, you agree it could be part of the Mavellan War, and they're looking not past their best because they've been through the walls a bit. But you can tell where the cost cutting is starting to come in. And whilst it's not necessarily spoiling stories, you can tell that the budgets are certainly more restricted in this season.
Although, obviously, just to disagree with anything Jason says, the Mavellan spaceship looks really good in this. When it lands and it buries itself, and that all looks, I think that looks really good. And they get the value out of doing it again in episode 4. They just reverse the footage and all that. But the Mavellan spaceship, I think, looks great. And it's nice, and you don't get many ships, I think, in Doctor Who where they land and bury. I think that's, kudos on the model. I think that, and then obviously Scaroff, as we'll come on to, that's a good model as well.
Yeah.
I think as things move on throughout the season, model money might. But Destiny, I think I love that. I love the ship.
And there's a bit of a theme for this sort of season, which has happened in other ones, which is what do we do with K9 in the beginning of every episode. And in fact, there's one episode he's not even in at all. He's just called to, but you don't actually see him. And in this one, he's got laryngitis, and is voiced by Roy Skelton.
No, well, because he only does the doesn't he?
Just, that's it.
But Terry didn't want K9 in the Daleks. He didn't want that. So they had to wait till he died for Big Finish to do it.
Is that true? I didn't know.
It is true. Terry Nation didn't want K9 and the Daleks being
wow.
Yeah.
Bad, isn't it? I mean, it just, there are other stories in this season where they find a way of sort of dispatching K9 quite quickly or disabling him. But it's quite, I like the idea that he's got laryngitis as a robot dog.
So dog need what you need it for. I'm quoting it.
Yeah.
Dog's got laryngitis. Okay, fine. It's funny, and again, I think we can see where some of that's coming in. And obviously, K9 can't really go around Paris when they're literally filming Hit and Run without license. So I suppose you've got to kind of just try and keep him to the studio stuff as much as possible. I mean, he would never have coped with Skaro anyway, would he?
Definitely not.
Brutal
Definitely
pulling
not.
along with the dummy prop, wouldn't there?
As the ground was.
Definitely not going down those sand dunes, that's for sure.
But the location stuff all looks great. I think Skaro looks great. I like all that's Underwater Menace location.
Oh, Stato, have you not looked this one up?
Oh, I didn't know that.
I think, and I'm willing to be proven wrong here, that the TARDIS, where TARDIS lands, is also featured in Doctor Who and the Underwater Menace.
Someone will be writing in the comments after this.
Write in the comments, say, well done, P-Bal, that is a fact, it's true, and you've shown the other two up.
Absolutely.
But yeah, no, location looks great. Love all the Jews. And I love all the Daleks. When they blow the Daleks up at the end, when they all go a bit kamikaze and they've got the when they blow them up, they blow them up. I mean, I love a good, stoke them up and you get the hoop, don't you? Like a bit of old tire coming down. I love it. I love all that. Do you know what? I think you've got to be quite humorless to not like Destiny of the Daleks. I'm just going to look at you two here.
Oh no, you're looking at me, aren't you, in this one? I think it's a good story. I just felt that, as I said at the start of the piece when we started talking about it, for me, perhaps I was being a little harsh, but potentially if I'm expecting a Dalek story, I suppose I was probably just expecting something just a little bit more than we did get with Destiny. I'm saying it's not the worst story, it's not the best Dalek story. I don't know, it just feels a little flat to me.
But you've got Disco Mervellans in spandex with neon guns. Oh my days! How much more energy do you want in this situation? Let it go. I mean, without Destiny, the Daleks, Pip Madeley's Twitter would be bereft. What would the Mervellans be watching if we didn't have this, eh?
I love that. I do. I love that Twitter feed. That's brilliant.
It's fun, and also because I think the big benefit this has over Genesis of the Daleks is it's done in 4 parts. They don't no saggy knickers 3 and 4 here. It's done in 4 parts. It's true. No Disco Mervellans in Genesis. You get mutoids and giant clams.
It is tighter it is altogether tighter indeed for not being a longer story. I think a 4-part suits this one perfectly well.
So has Stato, has he found any stats he wants to share with us?
Some of them have already come out in our conversation, like the costume from Menace of Death. This one changed to episodes rather than parts. So in the credits and in the opening sequence, it says episode 1 rather than part 1. Episode 4 has no incidental music. There's very little Dudley Simpson on this at all. And episode 4 has got none whatsoever. It was the final Terry Nation written story for the TV broadcast. And it was the first one, as you mentioned, under the script edited under Douglas Adams.
Broadcast, because that's quite important, I think, when we come later into the discussions. Yeah.
Broadcast, indeed. It's a key word here in this.
I added that in very, very carefully.
I mean, the story goes that Terry's scripts were very thin on the ground as usual when they landed in, and there was a fair amount of rework that was needed to get them into a state for Ken Grieve to, I think, make the best stick out of the direction on it for sure.
It's a shame he didn't come back, actually, Ken. I think he does a great job directing this, and it's the first use of Steadicam, I believe, as well.
It is, yeah.
It is, yes. And
see, I'm. What's happened here? Where, Stato? What's happened to you?
It's the beads.
You see, he was too busy putting his wig together this week.
So the first Steadicam, which is it's a date we should mark in our diaries. But he does it. I think he does a great job directing it. And it's a shame he didn't get another go with it.
Yeah, he's quite ambitious, certainly with some of the shots he tries to play. And I said that the edit at perhaps the end of episode 1 is just not quite in the right place. But it's a great scene where Lalla falls into the trap of the Daleks, if you like, or into the clutches of the Daleks. And I think the stuff on the to realize Skaro, particularly around the ruined buildings and things, and around the sort of the what would have been the mining setups. I think it's all pretty strong stuff from him. Yes.
I think if another sort of element, and it's something they were never going to do with the money, but if a lot of the Scaro stuff had been shot at night and it had been a bit darker, it would have added immeasurably, I think, to looking atmospheric and a bit creepier. You'd have the ghoulish sort of work people coming out looking a bit like zombies, and there are sort of allusions made to that in the novelization. Although the novelization is one of Mr. Dix's scantest typings, I think it just hits the 101 page mark. I think it's proper Doctor Who she wrote. But I think there's an allusion, I think, there back to that notion that it was dark and they're zombies. And yeah, one for casual, one for best. It's all the quotes coming through this one. I love this. Love this. This is where Doctor Who gets fun.
There is a lot of quotes in this season, I have to say. Some brilliant ones. So
are we cruising towards a score on Doctor Who and the destiny of the Daleks?
Yeah. Shall I go first?
I mean, what I would say is you've missed out because you could have used that wig for Meglos, but we've done that now.
We might have to do a special edition just to get the wig in, I think.
Get the wig back. Destiny is a good story. Don't get me wrong. I know that sort of said that it's not my favourite Dalek story because it's not, but I think, like you say, David Goodson does a good portrayal of Davros. He might be overlooked because of other people that have done it, before and after, and certainly for a longer period of time. But I do like the interplay. You're right, you're starting to see some of the sort of quotable bits come in, bit of humour. I do like the Romana bit at the beginning. I think it's a really great way of introducing her. And I scored this a very respectable 7.5.
7.5? Yeah. Okay. That's the old Mary in the middle makes of it.
Yeah, well, indeed. And a good score, that, James, by the way. I think that's a good strong start for this story. Absolutely, I'll agree with a lot of what you've said there. I think the Douglas Adams influence is starting to come through. For me, a good start to the season. I think the Movellans are a great addition to the series. Tom is on top form throughout this story. Nice to see the introduction of Lalla. I think there's some great direction. Shame about the Dalek props being a little bit beaten up in this one. But overall, I think this is as I said, it's a good start and warrants a good 7 out of 10 to get us started.
I knew that was going to be a 7. I could feel it. Anyway.
How could you tell? How could you tell?
Call me psychic. Call me psychic. I could just tell. Yeah, I really like Destiny of the Daleks. I don't think it's amazing. I mean, it's not the greatest thing. So, but it's really enjoyable. It's above average. I gave Doctor Who and the Destiny of the Daleks 8.
Ooh.
Were you expecting higher?
No, you're not a massive fan of Davros, are you?
But I'm a massive fan of Tom Lalla and Douglas Adams, so it can all counter out, and Disco Movellans. I mean, let's play to my weaker strengths.
I think we're missing a trick. I think we need Disco Movellans at Pandorica.
I'd do the costume, but I'm already halfway making a 9 one.
Wow.
I'm just learning to walk on the wedges.
And they are some wedges that Nyman's walking on, that's for sure.
So anyway, that gives Destiny of the Daleks a total of 22.5.
That's a good strong start to the season, that.
It's a solid start. And we move on. I mean, these were big ratings winners with ITV on strike. We move on to City of Death. Now we can now cover this story, and what's going to happen is nobody's going to say anything unkind about this, or the recording's going to stop quite quickly. So who wants to go first?
Go on, P-Bal. Now I'll go first because my sort of like one-liner is it's good, but is it a classic? Because this is, oh, I know, I can see your face immediately. It is. When you talk to people about Doctor Who, particularly when you talk about Tom Baker's era, this is the story that is often held up and said, you know, this is one of the best stories. And we've got the whole crew has moved off to Paris, and we're on the case of many Mona Lisas. It's we'll get into, you know, all the bits that I like about this story, but I will tell you up front that this is a cracking story, and I love it, not just the fact that they're in Paris. I love the music for this. I love the characters that are in this. My first call out will be to Catherine Schell, who was a Bond girl, who I just think is just as the Countess. It's just brilliant character. I think she brings this touch of glamour and this sort of a real sort of class to this as well. There's some brilliant characters in this. Bit of a daft plot, but I do like the story.
The funny thing is about the Catherine, and we'll come on to all of the wonderful cast, is that Isla was the first choice to be Countess Scarlioni. So you'd have had Julian and Isla, which would have made, you know, husband and wife sense. But she was working, so she still regrets it now. She's like, that was a really good one, and I didn't do a very good one, did I? I was like, well, some people like the King's Demons, but yeah, if I was going to pick a story, I'd probably rather be in the City of Death than King's Demons. Jason, are you a City of Death fan?
Oh, absolutely. It's just the standout story of season 17 for me, bar none. Brilliantly crafted script, bags of humour, used correctly throughout this story, and some great performances. And they really do combine, I think, to make this a classic. Okay, if you look at the plot very, very, very closely, you could pick a few holes in it. But quite frankly, the humour flows through this one brilliantly. I think the fact that they decided to take it off on location and do lots of running around Paris scenes just to really set the tone for the story. The little surprises and the little extra bits that we get throughout this story, particularly as the one-liners that, you know, they're endless in all honesty in this story. Without question, one of the best Doctor Who stories I think there is for your money.
And it's ironic because we were just talking about the budget cuts, and the reason why they went to Paris because it was cheaper than building a set back in the UK. So you actually benefited from the location shoots because it was cheaper.
Well, I mean, I think because I think there are pains to point out. I think it's funny because it is a slight myth that still prevails 40 years on, because I'm doing something with Julian at the moment. He's like, they all got to go to France apart from me, and they had a lovely time going to France, and I didn't go to France. And it's like, but then if you listen to Lalla side, she's like, we went to France for 3 days and didn't stop bloody running because we weren't allowed to film anywhere, and we just, me, the cameraman, the director, and we just ran the whole time to try and get as much footage as we can. So I think the glamorous thought that they all went to Paris and had a wonderful relaxed shoot is a bit more like they went out there and had a guerrilla unit and just ran amongst a lot of very bemused Parisians who didn't know what was happening and just didn't really question it.
But it really adds to the story, though, doesn't it? It really places it exactly where it places it exactly where you want it to be, because that's where the story's being told. You know, you really do get that it's Paris. So it's not a street dressed up to look like Paris. It obviously is, and it makes the story more enjoyable for me.
And
even if it's the table wine of a year.
Yeah. I love the music as well when they're just running across traffic and stuff, and you've got that sort of jaunty music in the background. It's really, exactly. See,
I thought he was going for gold then. Yeah, heat is on.
The time is right.
It is one of Dudley's best scores. It's probably Dudley's defining score in Doctor Who. City of Death is it. Let's be honest here, people. City of Death is the best Doctor Who story there is. It's the best.
And this is not a fake.
No, it is the best. There is nothing I dislike about this. Nothing. That it's glorious on every level, and I think I've got a hair in my mouth. It's the excitement. I'm like a cat. I'm going to bring up a fur ball in a minute. It's everyone. Tom and Lalla are obviously at the height of their liking each other moments here, so they are happily bouncing off. There's none of the days where they're not talking when they're filming this. They are obviously very much talking and more, and it shows. It absolutely shows in the chemistry. They're sparking. Julian and Catherine are probably like the sexiest, smoothest villains ever. They're so classy and they're so dry and they're so. It is the masterclass. If everybody was doing Tom's performance, it would fall apart. The fact that actually Julian and Catherine especially, I think, are very, very, they're playing it very straight, I think. It makes it work. And you can have the character. David Graham does a fantastic turn as Kerensky. He's having a whale of a time being on screen and not doing the voices and acting, and it's great. And even Tom Chapman, who's doing a sort of the bulldog drum thing, he's also not overdoing that. So it's bigger, but not over, and everyone's just perfectly pitched, and sort of what makes it work.
There are some amazing one-liners in this, and I just have to. I pulled out a couple of my favourites. One is the such a wonderful butler. He's so violent. I just there's something about the way, and I love the way that Tom interacts with Catherine. You're right. It benefits because they play it really deadly seriously, and on the lower side. We're going to see villains later on this season that go completely the other way, but they are just so tight in their performance. She's just there with her sort of cigarette, just looking at the Doctor, going, "Oh, who are you?" sort of thing, and he's just completely playing up to her, but it works so well. And there's another bit where he says, I don't know if you noticed, but he's just pulled a gun on me, sort of thing. I'd fire him if I was you. And it just these cracking one-liners. She just like looks at him and goes, "Oh, I know," like this. So I think that works so brilliantly well. Like you say, the chemistry between Tom and Lalla is again really, really good. I like Duggan. I like the fact that he's a bit witless. He just throws himself into the situation. There's a bit later on where he kicks in a wall and things like that. But he kind of adds a little bit of a contrast to all the other people that are going on. He's not the brightest tool in the box, but he gets things done. He's got a good intention behind it. So I think there are some really great characters in this, and the fact that it's mainly on location, the fact that you've got the story about the Mona Lisas, that he's trying to steal the Mona Lisa so then he can sell loads of fakes of the Mona Lisa. And again, I love the fact you've got the Doctor. He goes back in time, finds one of the splinter versions of him, and sort of start to unfold the story. The story, like you say, if you were to take the story out, okay, it's all right. But
what do you like about the story then?
Well, the fact that you're trying to sell like a dozen Mona Lisas to 12 different people.
Okay, but so to use a Doctor Who analogy, if you turned up a film print of Viewer from the Deep Five, and someone wanted to buy that off you, and they said, "I want to buy that, but I want to be the only person that owns that print," you could easily sell it on to a collector to keep that in their own collection. But how many collectors would have that in their collection knowing they were the only ones that had that? And that would be the fist pump for them. And you could then go around other people and say, you're the only person I'm selling this to. I think it's quite a clever thing, because it sort of relies on everyone's greed and deviousness, and that's the badness of the humanity. And I think there's a great line, isn't there, from Scaroff, and he says to be called inhuman is a great compliment to me, because he's got such a sort of contempt for the human race. I like that as a thing. I don't think that's too hokey.
I take a bit. In the whole of this story, it is a fabulous story. And again, you were talking about the model work of the ship when when you do the sort of the bit at the beginning. I was watching this, and obviously the Blu-ray will be coming out shortly, thinking, has that already been remastered? Because it's a really good model. That shot at the very beginning is really good. I really enjoyed that.
It's where the budget went.
Beautiful, isn't it? Isn't it? It's Ian Scoons, isn't it? I believe. So it's a great shot. And again, I get to reuse it at the end. So double your bubble on the money there. So it's good times. and the funny thing is with Duggan is basically, in linear terms, the thickest character in the show. He is very instinctive. He's there. But he's also the one that then saves the day. He's the most important character, because he's the one who just punches it. The most important punch in history. So for all the intelligence that goes back and forth, and all the grand schemes and the millions of years of human development to try and get back in time, it's all fixed by someone getting thumped in the face. And that's funny, but also so true.
Yeah. It also isn't that, it isn't silly to the point where you go, what just happened there? That's just ridiculous. It's just a brilliant way to end the story. And I think the character of Duggan, I'm going to echo what you've both been saying for the last couple of minutes. The character of Duggan, I think, fits really well, plays against the Doctor tremendously well. The Doctor's like, Duggan's punching people here and kicking walls down there, and the Doctor's like, he's playing against it, because he finds the character, I think, a little bit mildly annoying, it feels like. But there's some great scenes with Lalla, Tom, and Tom Chapman there, and Julian Glover and Catherine. I mean, crikey, what a perfect on-screen couple. You couldn't ask for anything better than that. This is right out of a Bond film. What you're seeing on screen is the BBC's version of what a Bond film would look like. And those two would have been absolutely, completely at home if that had been a full-scale, epic Hollywood Bond movie. They worked so well together. And don't forget, of course, to give a little shout out to Kevin Flood, who plays the butler, Herman. I mean, again, just a very deadpan character, but delivers the performance really well. There isn't a bad member of this cast. This is the dream Doctor Who cast we have on our hands here.
And there's the great transition as well, isn't it, from Catherine as being quite almost sort of shallow and playing with it, and then the moment where she realizes that what he's saying makes some sort of sense, and she realizes that actually, that's, I mean, and the cliffhanger where and he pulls off the head. Come on, that's one of the cliffhangers with the and poor old David Graham getting turned into a sort of skeleton, I suppose, because we've had the dead chicken again. It's brutal. I think that's what made all the more brutal by Julian, and that's the smug smile as it happens. It's so cruel because it's so casual, and it's so well done. It is so well done. I love it. I love it. I could go all day talking about how much I love this. I mean, it'd be a dull story because it'd be longer than the story. What's Scarleone's angle? I was never any good at geometry. It's great, and we haven't even said that Eleanor Bron and John Cleese turn up, and they aren't the strangest thing about the whole setup. It just works. They just kind of like it's there and it works.
They said they would only appear in it if it wasn't advertised beforehand because they wanted it to be a surprise. They happened to be in the studio. They were sort of dragged down to come and film this, short scene, and they were like, well, we don't, because I think John Cleese wanted to use his pen name if they were going to credit him, and they said no, we're not going to do that. So he said, I don't want any pre-publicity to say that we're in it. And again, what a joyous surprise when you're watching the episode, and you've got the two of them in the art gallery. I mean, that's brilliant.
Exquisite, absolutely exquisite.
And if there's any way you're going to park a TARDIS, you're going to park it in the art gallery in that way, because then it just becomes a piece of art. And it is just brilliant the way that they're both just stood there and they're admiring the TARDIS in the way that they're admiring it. And they just walk in, take off. Honest to God, that is one of the best scenes in the story.
But then you've got the humour there that the TARDIS lands pretty much everywhere and no one bats an eyelid. It lands in an art gallery and they're like, oh, but is it art? Is that play on the sort of the myth around the TARDIS that most people just walk past it, which I just think is really humorous, but not in a in-your-face kind of way.
And 2 stories in, we're still on Lalla costume watch. The schoolgirl outfits, it's a great look. I mean, it appeals to different people on different levels, I'm very sure. But it's a great aesthetic. And
she didn't realise, did she? She didn't realise that the schoolgirl outfit would draw so much attention.
Yeah, I thought that when I was putting my schoolboy outfit on it. I thought this I just don't understand it. I wouldn't understand anything. It's got 2 meanings. I did that on a different video earlier. It's fine. It's a different platform. But yeah, it's a great look, and I appreciate the sentiment that she was like, well, I hated wearing a school uniform when I was little, and it would encourage kids to want to wear the school uniform. Romana's doing it, and Tom's got his lapel. Everything.
The little paint.
Yeah. That's Doreen James, and again, shout out to Doreen for her fabulous designs on this one.
But again, subtle touches in some of the design there. And of course, this is the highest rated, if I'm correct, the highest rated Doctor Who story of all time, due to the fact that ITV were on strike. What a story to have pretty much the whole of the country sat there watching, instead of sitting watching, I don't know, Family Fortunes or Coronation Street or whatever it might have been back then. What a great story for people who weren't maybe Doctor Who regulars to come in and have a look at. And I do wonder quite how many of those people carried on with the series then after maybe discovering it for the first time.
About 6 million less, I think, the week after. I don't think they stuck around too long, actually. I think they'd gone after this one.
Hashtag spoilers.
It is interesting. It has had the sort of status of being the most watched. Just the best.
You have to wonder a little bit, I think. So obviously, there are good Doctor Who stories, there are classic Doctor Who stories, there are stories that stand out there are stories that are the lowest of the low. When this story, I mean, obviously it's penned by Douglas, and it's sort of David Agnew, but it's penned by Douglas
and Graham. I think it's a collaboration of wine and typewriter, I think.
Yeah,
and the rumor says that Douglas apparently wrote it in a weekend because he wanted to get to Paris to have a few drinks, I think, before the filming started. But how does a story like this just fall so perfectly into place? It's not just the writing, obviously it must be some of the casting, but this one just has the perfection written all the way through it. And if they can do it in this story, you have to question, why can't more stories be like that around it?
Well, I suppose David Fisher did the basic original, didn't he? And then they weren't struck on it, so Graham and Douglas spent the weekend with lots of wine, cigarettes, and a typewriter. I don't think you could do the season like that, could you? It would be quite a rough ride of it, wouldn't it? We've got 4 episodes to do, 2 days. So let's just go. Let's get drunk and do it. I don't suppose you can do it. It's interesting because I think a lot of these, and there's a story actually that we're going to be coming to shortly, that I think it all depends how it translates to the screen, actually, as to how well that's then perceived, I suppose. Because sometimes you can have the darkest of storylines, but if it's portrayed in a manner that's not so dark, do people then not take the elements of it seriously enough? And yet, this has got lots of broad comedy in it, but I think it's all played within that quite straight and quite dark elements to it. So I think it offsets, and I mean, it might not work for everybody. I do know there are a fair few viewers who don't dig the humor in these things, and that's fine. I don't think it's quite as in your face, laugh or don't laugh, as we mayhaps might get going forward, but it's witty and it works, I think.
I mean, I think the humor in this season in particular, I mean, it absolutely gels perfectly in this story and works well. And, there's humor in all of the stories as you come through the season. I think the humor can come to the rescue of a couple of the stories, but this didn't need it. And in fact, the humor and the drama during City of Death blend so seamlessly together that you just watch it for 100 minutes and you just sit there, watch it, and you're not going, oh, that's really outrageous, they shouldn't have put that comedy in there, or they shouldn't have done this, or they shouldn't have done that. No, the drama, the comedy, the whole thing just blends into one perfect piece of television.
The quality of the ensemble cast is just amazing, and it just works. Brilliant.
So are we cruising towards a score on Doctor Who in the City of Death then?
And we had every stat we can have here. That's the question.
We've covered, I think, almost all of them. Richard Sheikey, because Julian Glover didn't like wearing the mask. He was underneath that. And as we mentioned in the previous one, this is the one where K9 just doesn't appear at all. He's just yelled at through the TARDIS door. But no, that's it.
He's got Brexit levels of what's in now, hasn't he? Is there a shortage on the stats coming through? There's no lorry drivers to drop them round, is there? That's what's happening. Well, anyway, we shall head towards a score then, I think. Who's going first?
I don't mind going first. I think there's going to be no surprises here as we score this. Absolutely sublime is the word I will use to sum this story up. Great story, great comedy, great cast. Tom and Lalla on absolute top form. It's the perfect 10 from me.
Sorry, me and James sort of assumed that you were heading towards a 7.
How could you assume a 7 from that?
It's usually the build-up, isn't it? Of and I watch this every week. It's a really enjoyable story. It's one of my favourites. I think I'm going to have a tattoo with the title and the production code. It's a 7.
It's a 7.
That's also one of my shorter summaries for it, because there isn't really anything more you can say other than that.
Okay, so James, where are you headed on the City of Death?
Sometimes you hear the word classic bandied around far too easily for some stories, and we've seen that when we talked about Genesis. However, in this case, classic is warranted. It is a great story, and I really enjoyed rewatching it. And so I did also score it a 10.
Ooh, what we need is some kind of, I was going to say we need poppers, but I mean like party poppers. I don't mean like the sort of thing you find on the floor of Premier Inn. Yeah. Just share my love for the Premier Inn chains there, Dirty Gits. Okay, well, I mean, it's not going to be a surprise here, is it? One of the greatest joys, actually, of doing the conventions is that we had a City of Death reunion. Obviously not Tom and Lalla. Well, we have Lalla, Catherine, David, Julian, and a Mona Lisa, and that's all you want. So it is my favourite Doctor Who story of all time. It's top of my tree, and I am obviously going to give it 10.
Yay!
Hey! So like kind of firework.
Ba-doom, 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 ba-doom.
That means it gets 30 points.
30 undisputed points as well.
Yeah.
30.
I wish I could score it more. I really wish we could go higher and then I could score higher.
I wasn't allowed to do that for Dimensions in Time, so I think it's only fair that we stick to this 10 ceiling. Otherwise, I've got to go back and give Dimensions in Time 20.
We'll stick at 10 as the ceiling.
So that then is the end of part 1 of our season 17 review. It's 2 stories. Will we fly through the next 3? Will we find another story which is all 10s? So join us next week, and until then, it's bye bye Duggan.
Oh.
Bye bye Duggan. Bye bye.